Nope.
Have you ever heard of the Hatman? For those of you who haven't, allow me to briefly explain. The Hatman is essentially a shadow person, except a very particular one. To take it one step further, a shadow person, also known as a shadow figure, shadow being, or black mass, is the perception of a patch of shadow as a living, humanoid figure, as interpreted by believers in the paranormal or supernatural as the presence of a spirit or other entity. Many have reported having an encounter with a frightening, dark shadow man that wears a hat. The Hatman always seems to invoke intense fright when seen by witnesses. It is also believed he is drawn to and possibly feeds off of various negative emotions. So next time you're having a rough week, try and perk up, or you may become the next person to have a horrifying Hatman encounter. Number 1. I saw the Hatman a lot growing up. I started seeing him after we moved into what is now my parents' house when I was about 9 years old. Honestly, for the first few years, I thought it was my imagination because I was younger and, quote, more susceptible to that sort of thing. I only thought more of it when my best friend started insisting that we have sleepovers at her place. After she flat out refused to come to my house, I asked her what her deal was, and she confirmed what I'd been experiencing. What I saw growing up was the tall silhouette of a man in a hat from the early 1900s. I say that because the hat had a flat top and wide brim, but not like that of a cowboy hat. He also had a red tie. It was not incredibly pronounced, but it was the only thing that wasn't shadowed all over. He would appear either at the foot of my bed when I was falling asleep or just waking up, or in the far corner by my door when I was awake reading or texting in bed. Sometimes he would be there for what felt like hours. Other times he would disappear as soon as I noticed him. It was always in a dimly lit or dark room. Also, for honesty's sake, it was really hard to look at him. He was easier to see if you don't look directly at him. This is why I thought it was my imagination for such a long time. My grandmother was living with us on and off during this time, dying of lung cancer. Depression runs very deep in our genes, and both her and my mother were terribly depressed. After my grandma eventually did pass away, the depression got even worse for my mom. As I became a teenager, I too had lots of issues with depression. I saw that Hatman up until I was about 20, which is around the time I got a good handle on my own depression. I did have a couple of weirdly suicidal moments during this time that are very out of character for me, but it could have very well been me growing up and realizing how easily life can go. The Hatman really scared me when I was younger, but as I got older, I adjusted to him. In the beginning, it was horrible. I had terrifying nightmares, and I was scared witless. But as time passed, I felt more observed rather than I did threatened. Eventually, when he did show up, I just got angry because all I wanted to do was sleep, not deal with his attention-sucking self. After I stopped caring, he too stopped caring. But when he didn't scare me, lots of other things did. The general haunted house stuff began to occur, like banging, disembodied voices, lights turning on and off, doors opening and closing, etc. Even weirder stuff started to happen, like blankets being yanked off of us and weird shapes being imprinted on our skin. Also, for a couple of years, when my depression was at its worst, I was followed by a giant black dog type shadow creature. When the Hatman would show up, it was sort of a relief, because at least I knew it was non-eventful. I know it's kind of silly, but I felt like he got attached to my family as we were all going through these horrible events. He was my introduction into the paranormal. Looking back, it kind of helped me cope with my real life situations. I went home at night and I literally fought my demons. Let me also make it clear that despite all that, I do not like the Hatman and would prefer I never see him again. Number 2. I saw him once, around 3 a.m. I was really restless from cabin fever, but it was too cold to be outside. I decided I would pace the hallways of my apartment building to get rid of some of the pent-up energy. The apartment I lived in was small and crowded, so I tried my best to be quiet as not to wake up anyone I lived with. My neighbors probably thought I was nuts, but it was a low-life kind of place to begin with, so no one really cared. Anyway, that's when I saw him standing at the end of the hallway. I didn't feel any type of horror like you do with sleep paralysis. He was only there for a second before quickly passing through the door of one of the apartments. On that note, I knew the people that lived in that apartment that he walked into, but not very well. We had a mutual friend, though, and sometimes I would hang out in their apartment when he was visiting. One night, I knocked on their door because I had gotten a call from our mutual friend who was hanging out at their place. Their living room was barricaded off with some empty boxes, and everyone was hanging out in their cramped bedroom. I asked why, as the living room was clean, nicely decorated, and had a lot more room for us to hang out in. They told me that they didn't go in there anymore. When I asked them why not, they just told me that there was something really negative about that room all of a sudden, and they didn't want to talk about it. So we all just kind of sat around awkwardly on their bed. They weren't really the type of people who were into the paranormal. They were just alcoholic stoners who seemed to fight a lot. I still wonder if all their hostility may have led to the Hatman going into their apartment that night. Number 3. I've seen the Hatman too. I always thought it was just me until reading all of these posts. Maybe the Hatman I saw isn't the same as everyone else's, but I wanted to share my experience, just in case. I think I was around 20 when it happened. I had been struggling with depression for a long time, and so had my grandma, who I lived with at the time. She was also dealing with a ton of other health problems. Anyway, one night, probably sometime between 1 and 4 a.m., I woke up and I had to pee. I use the term woke up very loosely because I basically felt the urge to go, barely cracked one eye, and hobbled to the bathroom without being very aware of my surroundings. The way the upstairs of my house is set up, I have to walk past the stairwell to get to the bathroom. As I'm walking back past the stairs, in my barely awake state, I sense something on the landing about 3 steps down and only 5 feet away from me. I've sensed things like this before, and I would usually freak out and run. But whatever this was had such a strong presence that it caused me to be completely frozen. I glanced to my right, and I saw a man standing there. He was taller than me, which is pretty tall considering that I'm 5'9". He was wearing a plain black suit, white shirt underneath, and a black bow tie. His skin was paper white, and he had a thick, black, Charlie Chaplin-esque mustache. His eyes really freaked me out. They were the most piercing blue I have ever seen. I would age him somewhere between 45 to 50. And of course, he was wearing a black bowler hat. He just stood there with his arms at his sides, staring at me. His presence was ominous, foreboding, and I got the distinct impression that he was there to deliver a message. I was terrified, but I also knew that he wasn't there to hurt me. Once I snapped out of it, I hightailed it back to my room and shut the door. This was the first time I ever saw him, and hopefully, the last. Number 4. My grandmother, my mom's mom, passed away when I was 5. I didn't find out about her encounters until I was 18. I am now 25. According to my mother, Grandma claimed to have been visited several times throughout her life by things such as a bright white light coming from her window that would disappear whenever she called for help, several shadow children, and the Hatman. To be clear, she didn't call it that. She just described it in that way. She also claimed to have experienced, quote, losing time. When I was 13, I learned that my other grandma, my dad's mom, experienced sleep paralysis several times and was also visited by the Hatman. She described waking up to something looming over her, causing her to be frozen with fear. It was the shadow of a man with a brimmed hat and duster coat. I remember her saying that she thought it was death, and I think she also thought it had something to do with someone close to you dying. One story of hers involves an encounter one night where her mother and sister both saw it during the same night. My father claims to see it. He says he makes it go away through sheer anger and rage. He's described times where he's gotten up out of bed and threatened it. At the age of 19, I put the stories together in my mind and started to research the Hatman online very heavily. Much of that research led to theories of it being purely a psychological phenomena. I kept telling myself that I was going to experience it because it was in my mind so often. And then, one night, just like I had predicted, it happened. I woke up paralyzed and thought, oh shit, it's happening. I told myself to relax and take it all in. Then I saw a shadow move across my room as if someone walked by my window. I immediately blacked out due to fright, then quickly woke up again. This time, I was lying opposite my original position. My head was down at the foot of my bed, and my feet on my pillows. I saw an incredibly bright light coming from my closet, where there is no source of light, before passing out again. This experience can be taken as evidence for my two theories. 1. I thought about this so much that I essentially called out to this entity/being. And 2, I thought about it so much that I had a dream involving the Hatman, due simply to subconscious suggestion. I feel like it's very real, just not the way that modern science and physics have learned to define yet. Number 5. When I was about 18, my girlfriend and I at the time went to a movie theater in town that doubles as a restaurant. They serve beer, have tables set up, the whole deal. We get there really early before our movie starts, and we're the only 2 people in the theater. We're sitting in the way back with only one other table behind us. The way the tables are situated makes it so that you have to go up a ramp and go past us in order to sit at that table behind us. As we are waiting for the movie to start, I look behind us at that table. That's when I see him, the Hatman. I noticed he was wearing a trench coat, but other than that, I didn't really find anything scary about the situation. The dim lights of the theater made it so I couldn't see his face. I thought it was a bit weird, and I made a comment to my girlfriend saying that I like the 50s style that the man had going on. She agrees, and we go back to watching the previews. A few more minutes went by when our server comes to take our drink orders. I glance to the table behind us. Empty. The man was gone. This completely freaks out my girlfriend and me because there was no way he could have left without passing right by us. Fast forward almost 8 years later. I'm at my mom's house, hanging out one day. It was a typical summer evening in Florida. Outside, it was storming really hard, complete with thunder and lightning. It's the twilight hour outside, and my new girlfriend and I are hanging out in the front room, watching the storm. We're the only ones in the house, and one of my favorite things to do is just sit there and watch nature be awesome. We both stand up and head for the kitchen, cutting through the dining room. My mom kept a huge, wall-sized mirror that looked back into the front room where we just were. Keep in mind that it's dark and we had all the lights off since we were watching the storm. Like something out of a movie, lightning strikes, and halfway through the dining room, we both look up into the mirror. What do we see standing behind us? You guessed it. The Hatman. There he stood, in the archway to the front room, almost exactly like I saw him all those years ago. I said nothing. My girlfriend said nothing. We kind of just hastily ran into the kitchen and turned on all the lights in the house. Once we have the lights on, I turn to her and choke out, "Did you?" She stops me and says, "Yeah." Needless to say, we were both extremely freaked out, especially when I told her I had seen him all those years ago. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this week's story. If you did, be sure to smash that like button down below, or I'ma send my boy the Hatman to get that ass. Just kidding, or am I? But really, I did just upload gameplay of the Hatman to my second channel, Captain Creepy, link on screen right now. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe for future videos. Until next time, dear listener, stay safe out there. I'll be seeing you in the next video.